Tonight, we are going to talk about on the show, look back at the 2014 Snowmageddon. We are all going to talk about the issues that happened surrounding the Fultondale tornado. That and a whole lot more coming up on this edition of The Forecast with Stingray and TP. All right, so welcome into another exciting edition of The Forecast with Stingray and TP. I am your host, Stephen Ray, and let me go ahead and pull up my co-host, Taylor Plott.
Hey, Stephen,
Taylor, how are you doing, sir?
Doing pretty good. How about you?
Doing good, man, and thank you for joining us. And there's a lot to talk about on this edition.
There is. We had a lot of stuff that happened not only a couple days ago, but actually a few years ago.
Yes. And why don't you go on ahead real quick and tell everybody about the Fultondale tornado and your thoughts about it.
Well, it was definitely the one that outperformed all the other storms. I felt like, and a lot of us in the weather community felt like it was a setup to where we wouldn't see widespread severe weather, meaning where we would have multiple storms producing problems for us, but we have to watch for that one or two that could give us some issues. And sure enough, we had a supercell that developed across central Mississippi and tracked all the way even into Georgia. Georgia, there was a tornado warning I saw early on in the morning just north of Atlanta, and that was the exact same supercell that produced the Fultondale tornado. So it was just one of those setups where most everybody would be fine. It definitely wasn't a huge outbreak type of situation, but it was one to where we would have to watch for that storm or two that kind of got going a little bit too much.
Yes. And that's why we always tell you, take these things serious when there is a tornado watch or a severe weather risk issued.
Exactly. And the Storm Prediction Center, hats off to them for upgrading the risk that we had. We at first had the marginal risk in place, and that was on the current thinking that was pretty good thinking at that point. One of the issues that we ran into was that the low-level cap that we thought that was going to be in place, the warm layer just above the surface, we thought it was going to be a certain temperature. It's going to be a little bit too warm for really a lot of things to get going. And then the models kept trending to, okay, it's not going to be that warm. It's going to be a little bit cooler than that. And so your lapse rates at the surface ended up being a little bit better than what we first initially thought. And so hats off to them over there in Norman, Oklahoma for upgrading the risk to a slight and then issuing that tornado watch 4 hours in advance of when that Fultondale tornado happened. And
Absolutely.
Also hats off to the Weather Service in Birmingham. When they issued that tornado warning, the tornado didn't touch down until about 8 minutes or so after the warning had been issued. So right where the tornado touched down, people there had about 8 minutes to get into their safe place and get ready. So really, really good warning on that tornado.
Let me go on ahead over here and show you what we are talking about. And as you can see right there, as of 10:45 on Monday night, what you're looking at now is the actual archived reflectivity, and over there on the other side is the actual spin of the tornado. At this point, it was just off to the northeast of Fultondale, heading towards center point. Let me put this into motion for you. And there you can see as it crossed I-65, then it became more, down on the ground and doing a ton of damage. But this is the archived radar image that you're looking at from this past Monday night that produced the EF3 tornado there in Fultondale.
Yeah, and it touched down just to the west of Interstate 65 and crossed right over the Walker's Chapel Road exit. I know a lot of people probably know that exit if they're from around this area. You have the Chick-fil-A there. You got I believe an Outback there, hotels, gas stations. That's a really, really good spot if you're on a trip heading down to the beach to stop and have some food. And so it crossed right over there, and as soon as it crossed the interstate, it immediately intensified. When it touched down, tornadoes, when they touch down, they don't really touch down with their full force. It gets them a little time to get going. So when it touches down, it was an EF0 and then an EF1, and then it quickly became an EF2 and then an EF3 as it crossed the interstate. And then when it finally reached the eastern side of Fultondale, getting towards the center point area, it started to weaken back into a lower end tornado. But
yes,
no, it ramped up very quickly. The storm tightened up very quickly. And one of the things that research has been showing is a lot of people through a lot of the years have been asking questions about why is there always these typical tornado tracks? And that was a really good question. It's something that had been boggling our minds in the weather industry for decades. We always hear about that typical Tuscaloosa to Birmingham where this tornado happened was right along that path where we usually get tornadoes. April 27th tornado was literally just a few miles south of that. Right. You get a path from Decatur into the northern part of Madison County up here in Huntsville. You get one that goes from Jasper to Coleman up to Arab and then to Gunnersville. You get one over in the Shoals as well. You always have these typical tornado tracks that you get. And research has shown that what you get is more than likely a terrain interaction, which is something that we were kind of theorizing that would be the case. So whenever you start right along the ridge tops, especially across Sand Mountain here across northeastern Alabama, you get an effect to where the winds can actually be enhanced in the low levels and enhance that low level spin and low level helicity, and that's where you get the storms like to follow where the best rotation is, and then you get a tornado that develops. And this, if anybody's familiar with the topography over there in Fultondale, you got a lot of like rolling hills and some ridge tops.
Yes.
You got Red Mountain down across downtown Birmingham, and then we go north into Fultondale. You have this other little ridge that develops, and right where that develops, you get a lot more low level spin to work with. So while you might not have a tornado off to the west, about 5 miles away, closer to say the Hueytown area, or places along the northwest side of Birmingham, once you get over into that Fultondale area, the topography gets a tad bit different. And just where the storm sets up, it can really favor whether or not it will enhance the tornado potential with that. So a lot of research has gone into that. There's been several research teams over the past several years. You probably heard us talk about Vortex Southeast a lot over the past several years. That's collaborative research between the Weather Service, NOAA, UAH up here in Huntsville, University of Oklahoma is part of it as well. And a lot of research has gone into why are these tornadoes developing in these specific locations multiple times throughout the decades, and that's one of the conclusions that we're coming to.
Now, if you watch this radar loop here, if you watch the couplet, you can actually kind of see that the storm actually takes a jog, or the rotation takes a jog a little to the north once it crosses I-65. Do you notice that? It
Yeah,
kind of jogs just a little bit off to the north. What do you think ultimately caused that for it to actually jog just a little bit to the north?
it's just the way that the storm structure works. Um, you get you get tornadoes that will develop in an area, and then the rotation can get kind of sucked back into the storm, or it
Right.
can actually stay kind of out by itself. The big classic tornadoes that you see, especially during the springtime, where you see the hook is well defined, you got a debris ball that is well detached
Yeah.
from the main part of the storm, meaning that when you look at it on the radar, the hook's away from where most of the heavy rain and the hail is, part of the supercell. But you got to also remember where the tornado is. That is the updraft of the storm. So it's literally the updraft that is making contact with the ground, and so that's the heartbeat of the storm itself. What just happens is when it goes up in the atmosphere, it turns because the upper level winds, the wind shear that we're talking about, it tilts the clouds. If you see clouds during a springtime event, or even on a day to where you just have cumulus clouds and there's really no rain to speak of, but there's a lot of wind shear, you'll notice how when the clouds go up, they start to tilt
Yeah.
in wherever direction the winds are pushing it. And so just what happens with that is just the way that it developed, and it's possible that it has some terrain interaction as well with where it could jog in different directions. But really and truly, that's just how where the best rotation of the updraft set up, when you had the rotation was first broad and then it tightens up. It just happened to tighten up, and it just tightened back closer into the storm itself.
Yes. Well, let's go on ahead and take a look at some of the damage that it did. And unfortunately, this was a site-built home that was pretty much leveled, other than a few exterior walls.
Yeah, and that's the definition of a strong tornado. When I started seeing the damage pics, really and truly, just when I saw the radar image of when it happened, going through coverage with it, I immediately knew that we were dealing with at least a strong tornado, at least EF2. Just
Right. Whew.
so
What
what
happened?
happened? I don't know. You just kind of went away. But
Okay.
so when you're dealing with a strong tornado like this, you're gonna just get damaged like that. There's the really good thing about this tornado was that if you did get into your safe place, you were more than likely going to be okay. We unfortunately had a death of a teenager. They were taking shelter in a basement, and it just so happened that when the tornado came through, a tree fell on the house and it collapsed it into the basement. So even though we tell you to go into your safe spot like the basement, that is the most safe place you can be.
Yes.
But you're still in danger, unfortunately, when tornadoes come through, and especially when we talk about the big EF5 tornadoes. Some of those, you honestly need to be underground, or you might not survive in your house. Being in a hallway, or even maybe even in a basement in a very violent EF4 to EF5 tornado, you might not even make it through that. So that's why I really encourage people to, if they can get something underground, that would be very preferable, or going to a storm shelter nearby. But yeah, when you're dealing with an EF3 tornado like this, you're going to get the winds get strong enough to where the interior wall. So you're getting the collapse of the exterior walls on the outside of your house, and then you're getting enough strong winds to actually collapse it on the interior as well.
And I don't know why you jumped out for a second. I don't know if that's Restream or what. but I apologize, and if it happens again, I will bring you right back in.
Yeah.
So now this, of course, is why we tell you guys always leave a mobile home. This right here is what was left of a manufactured home in the Fultondale area. There is literally nothing left. This is a great example of why you have to get out of a mobile home.
I mean, we can't stress it enough. I know that some people have, they might not have another place to go that they think of. They're thinking of, do we have friends nearby or stuff like that? Honestly, if you're in a mobile home, I would almost guarantee you that if you go to a convenience store or a Dollar General or some site-built structure nearby, they're going to let you in. You might even, if you could even go to a stranger's house in a situation like this. We all know tornadoes happen in the South. We're if you live here, from here, born and raised, everything, you know the drill with these things. I would almost guarantee you that if you're in a mobile home and you end up getting in the path of a tornado, and you know that there's site-built homes very nearby and reachable before the tornado gets there, if you go knock on somebody's door and just ask, hey, can I come seek shelter with you, I guarantee you're going to find somebody. Somebody's going to let you in, and so you can be safe from the storm. But it's mobile homes. There's nothing wrong with mobile homes. I'm not against mobile homes. Us in the weather community are not against mobile homes. Now, we tell you to leave them because they do this. They are not anchored to the ground. You don't have anchor bolts. You don't have a foundation. So what the tornado does is it literally can just go right underneath it, pick it up, and then it's just shredded to pieces.
Yes.
And you can get that even with a low-end EF1. EF1 is not considered a strong tornado. Any tornado can do damage, but when we're talking about the damage scale, EF1s can tear mobile homes apart. And that's winds only around 90 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour. I wouldn't even want to be in a mobile home if an EF0 came by, and that's winds around 75 miles per hour. That can still topple a mobile home. It might not tear it to shreds, but it can sure pick it up and toss it down the road several miles. And you're probably not going to survive that. So yeah, we keep preaching about it, and I know that we can't fix everything. We can only do what we can on our end, which is educate people, tell people, hey, you need to be doing this or really not be doing that. But at the end of the day, it's up to the individual to do it. And if they don't do it, that's on them.
So here is another picture of a not a manufactured home, an actual home. And you can see that a site-built home, and it is completely just all but gone.
Yeah, there were a lot of reports. I never ended up seeing an actual picture. I actually talked to my dad about it. He said he saw some aerial photos from a drone that kind of confirmed what some of the reports were saying. But there was a report somewhere in where the worst damage was located, where there was a home that was completely either wiped off its foundation or almost completely wiped off, and the anchor bolts were exposed. That's where the foundation actually goes into the bottom of the house, the exterior part of the house. You have anchor bolts that are there. That's part of the support system for things like this. It's supposed to keep the house together during bad weather. And unfortunately, of course, if you get a strong enough tornado, that's not gonna help really. But there were some reports that there was a couple of foundations that were exposed, and the anchor bolts being exposed as well. And when I started hearing that, again, I didn't really see photos of it, but I kept hearing it. You start actually getting close to, could this have been an EF4 tornado? Because that's getting up to the very violent category. But based on what the Weather Service saw and the damage assessment, they go through. A lot of people might not know how they actually do the surveys. They got a checklist. And you can actually go online if you search National Weather Service tornado checklist, and it will take you to a website, and you can go through. It gives you different degrees of buildings, like a site-built home or a site-built commercial building or a hotel, or you go to a site-built commercial like high-rise. Talk about buildings getting up to 15 plus stories high, and you get a wind profile basically that shows in this end of the wind scale you're expecting this damage. In this end of the wind scale, you're expecting this damage, and it'll give you it's very straightforward. It says at this level, you're expecting the exterior walls to be knocked in, some damage to the interior walls, and then you get to the higher areas, and then we'll say completely wiped completely off the foundation wiped completely clean, and that would be the EF5 tornado. So you go through this checklist, and you actually see how they look at this stuff, and whenever I see all the damage stuff going out, I will pull that up and start to look at and kind of go through the progression and see kind of what I come up with. And the rating of the EF3, 150 miles per hour, I think that's completely spot on. I have no problem with that. It matches up perfectly with what with all the checklist that you go through. But it's a very, very thorough evaluation that they go through. And if you're dealing with a tornado like this, where you have a lot of damage, but then you got this really big small little focused area of the most extreme damage, there's some times where they might not be able to get there for a day or two because of all the cleanup. But what they have to do is you can clean the road up, but don't touch the structures yet. You really don't want to touch the structures yet because they still have to go in and be like, okay, well, it did this. So, but it can take some time. They're very thorough with it. They did a great job with it the other day. The preliminary data came out that it was an EF2, a high-end EF2, and that's just based on the damage they had already seen. So we knew that it was at least that, but they hadn't gotten to the bad part yet. And when they did, they definitely found it was EF3.
So this actually right here is what was left of the Holiday Inn up there in Fultondale.
Yeah, and so that would be, if you did the damage assessment, you would go through the commercial building. It gives you examples of like gas stations, stuff like that, and you find the one that says hotels. And whenever you start seeing the roof collapse and then you're getting some exterior wall damage, that's easily an EF2 rating. And that's some of the damage that they came up to early on, because that's right off the interstate, right there on Walker's Chapel Road. And so immediately that's right away starting to get to EF2 damage. And then the worst happened just northeast of that.
So, of course, there is the aerial view looking in the path of the actual tornado. And you can see a lot of debris, a lot of, tarps on houses, and then, of course, trees that were snapped or either debarked.
Yeah, and whenever you start seeing trees debarked, that is a very strong indication of a very strong tornado, because it's basically, it's one thing to have enough wind to push a branch down or push a tree over. I mean, you can have trees that are uprooted and tossed around with winds of just 60 miles an hour. It doesn't even have to be a tornado; just be straight line winds. But when you start talking about the bark itself is actually being stripped off of a tree, that's winds that are getting well over 130 miles per hour.
How do you survive that, man? You can't.
The best way. I mean, if you're out in that, you're not surviving one bit. But if you're in a site-built home, in the most interior room, away from as many windows as you can survive that. The problem that you run into is when you get these higher-end EF4s into EF5s that literally completely wipe the foundation clean. If you're in a home and that happens, the chances of your survival are very low. You need to be underground or in an actual storm shelter itself.
Yes,
that is able to sustain winds of 200 plus miles an hour.
And tornadoes are boom, gone. Hurricanes, when they get winds like this and higher, they sit there for a little while.
Yes.
Like you would have 2 hours of it, 3 hours of it. That's why hurricanes are so much more powerful and do a wide amount of damage. It's because tornadoes, winds come, boom, gone. Hurricanes, they kind of sit over the same area for a long time.
Yeah, the danger's the same. You're just talking about something on a different
Right.
Length or width scale. When you're talking about tornado, even the widest tornado is only 2 miles wide, 2.5 miles wide. I believe that's the El Reno tornado over there in Oklahoma that happened back in like 2012, something like that. It was like 2.5 miles wide. So even just with the largest tornadoes, you're only dealing with just a couple of miles.
Yeah.
And even though you have winds that can easily be over 200 plus miles per hour, that can do significant, unfathomable damage and destroy so many homes, so many lives. That's on a very small scale. With a hurricane, you're dealing with a wind radius that could be around 50, 60 miles.
Yep.
And within that radius, you could have sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. But the thing is, when it's moving on shore, you're getting hours upon hours of that wind. And so you're continually just battering the area with all that wind. And the tornado, it does the same type of damage, but the thing is, you're right, it happens much quicker. It's literally within a matter of minutes, and you're gone. Tornadoes are tracking at about, on average, around 30 miles per hour or so, and it's not stopping at stoplights, stopping at railroad crossings or anything. It just keeps trucking along, but you might only be in it for a matter of seconds.
Right.
And then with a hurricane, you're dealing with it for hours upon end.
So that, of course, wraps up the, tornado coverage of this show. But now there was also a little bit of history that happened on this day back in 2014. And Taylor, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. A lot of the meteorologists on that day got it wrong.
Oh, I'm not gonna debate you on that one whatsoever. I mean, we completely got it wrong. It was a scenario where you had a lot of stuff that usually down the south we don't deal with. You had what's called a flash freeze. We get them down here occasionally, but it's really something that we don't really deal with that often. What happens is when you've got during the morning time frame, you had the temperatures were in the teens and even lower 20s for parts of central Alabama. But the thing is, the roadway temps, the ground temps, were still above freezing. So when the first initial precipitation fell, which was in the form of some sleet and some snowflakes, it melted on the roadways. But the air temperature was so cold outside that once it melted, it almost acted like freezing rain. It immediately froze. It immediately became ice on the roadway. So there was no freezing process that takes some time. Usually when you're dealing with stuff like freezing rain, the rain falls and it hits that the surface that is either around freezing or just above freezing, but the air temperature itself is freezing, and so you get a gradual decrease of the liquid temperature till it finally hits that 32-degree mark, and then it becomes that sheet of ice during freezing rain. The complete opposite happened with the Snowmageddon. When it fell, the air was so cold that when it melted on the surface, it immediately froze into a layer of ice, and so very quickly you had all these roadways across central Alabama were just ice skating rinks, and nobody really knew it. One of the things, and we've kind of moved more into this direction. It used to be that the meteorologists, the weather community, really wasn't big on roadway impacts. It was something that really wasn't in our realm, if you will. that was more of the DOT and stuff like that. They knew a little bit more of how the roadways react to certain things. So it was a learning experience for all of us. I mean, I'm not perfect by any means. Nobody's perfect, and you go through these situations where you could have a huge bust like this, and it costs people lives and property, and just inconvenience them. And we hate that it happens, but we learn from it. We learn from our mistakes, and we move on. And so now when we start dealing with winter weather issues down here, we always keep that on the back of our in the back of our mind of, all right, well, where are the temperatures looking at? Are they actually going to be in that realm of where there could be a flash freeze again, to where we'd be dealing with the same situation? Another thing that happened was we didn't really think that the precipitation was going to be as far north as it was. This was initially intended to be more of a south central Alabama snow event, close to Montgomery, Prattville, Opelika, down to down to Auburn, places like that, where you see right there on the map where you have the 3 or 4 inch totals. That is where the bulk of the storm was supposed to be, which it was, but there really wasn't supposed to be anything really north of that. And so when it started to move in, we started noticing that the precipitation was much farther north than what we were anticipating. And then everything just went downhill from there.
And it stayed frozen for at least 36 hours.
It was a humanity crisis.
Humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, thank you. It was a humanitarian crisis that happened. It was a situation where things happened in the morning, and even when the precipitation was over, it was still well below freezing, and there were still people trapped in their cars. A couple of friends of mine were coming home from college. I had actually just graduated from high school back in 2011, so we're still college stuff going on, and you had a lot of people that I knew were either coming back home or going out and about doing their own thing, and they were stuck on the interstate for hours upon end. Some of them even left their cars and went to find shelter. One of the worst things that happened is that not only you had a lot of wrecks on the interstate and roadways, but they were very, very bad wrecks. They were very life-threatening wrecks that happened, and emergency vehicles couldn't really get to them because everything was a gridlock. You had to have, if I remember correctly, there were medevacs coming via helicopter through to certain areas to get them to a hospital. But there was that's a day that I know I will never forget. Right. I know everybody in the weather community that was down here forecasting that event will never forget. But that just goes to show that we still don't know everything about the weather. And I hope that one day our technology gets there. I think it will definitely get a lot better than what we have now. I think you'll finally be able to, when we talk about forecasting, especially snow events and severe weather events, more than 7 days out, we call that more of the La La Land area, because a lot of stuff can happen in the models. We don't really know exactly what's going to happen that far out. Honestly, right now we don't really know what's going to happen more than 3 days out. When you get to the 1 to 3 day time frame, we're pretty good at forecasting that. I mean, there'll be tweaks here and there with a few temperatures being nudged in a different direction, maybe rain chances going up, stuff like that. But when we get to the 3 to 5 day time frame, we actually start getting pretty iffy, even out there, and you think, well, wow, that's actually not that far away. And y'all even have a 7 day forecast, and so. But once you get beyond that, it's it's really a shot in the dark. But I do think that we'll get to the day where your 7-day forecast is going to be really, really good. I don't think we'll ever get to the point to where you can go 10 plus days out knowing exactly what will happen. But I think technology and the way that we've learned and we'll continue to learn about the atmosphere, we'll get really good at forecasting things many years from now. But that picture right there just goes to show it. Like I mentioned, there you had several wrecks, several places where emergency vehicles couldn't get to, and it wasn't just because there were so many cars that couldn't move on the roadway. It was just because of this right here. I mean, nobody could drive on that. It was an ice rink out there. It's literally one of those things where you watch. I don't know if you watched the movie Christmas with the Cranks, one of my favorite Christmas movies of all time, and the sprinkler system or they had watered the yard and the walkway out to the mailbox. What happened as soon as he walked out on that thing? He just doubled over, flipped over, and just like that. That's the ice. You
Yes.
can't do anything on it.
So that I want to go back to something though. That is downtown Birmingham at midday.
Mm-hmm.
That is like a ghost town, creepy, isn't it?
It is. That's definitely a creepy image, especially when you see the cars that are just there and nobody's with them. I remember seeing photos in the days leading after this of all the cars that were abandoned on the side of I-65,
Yes.
I-2059, 459, 280. Talk about 280. 280. There's 280 right there. 280 getting into. I believe that's getting down into the Highway 31 area. Down there on 280. I'm not completely sure. I think that's where that photo's at. But I mean, all those cars were just there, and you couldn't do anything about it, and you had to leave them. A lot of people ran out of gas, and they couldn't keep the heat on their car, and so it's 20-something degrees outside. You don't have heat running, and if you're not bundled up as well as you should be, then you're going to start having some issues. And that's why people started having to leave their cars and seek shelter, because it wasn't just this is just going to last a couple of hours. No, this was an entire day to 2 days of just absolute mayhem happening across the area. And
if you would like to see more on this, there are look at that. Now, I didn't see that.
That's 280 coming up on 459.
Jeez.
Yeah.
And see people walking?
Yeah. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I wasn't in the broadcast field yet. It was just 2014. I graduated high school in 2011. But yeah, that was something else that happened. You had some cars that caught on fire. Right. But it's something that I thought I would never truly see. I mean, I know that we always talk about how it only takes a dusting of snow to shut things down here. I mean, I already knew that. I grew up down here. I know exactly what happens. You forecast an inch of snow and schools get canceled, roads start shutting down and stuff like that. But this was, nobody expected it, and then all of a sudden, all the rush hour traffic is out there, people resuming their going about their daily things, getting ready, getting out, going to work, and then there's all this ice on the road, and nobody knew about it until everything started to happen.
There's another good example right there.
Yeah.
So, man, I tell you what, we will never ever forget that in the Alabama community.
No, that's it. That in itself goes down almost like the April 27th tornadoes. It's people down here remember two things right now. That is actually three things if you live long enough down here. The first one is the 74 outbreak when take that to four things. 74 outbreak, the blizzard of '93, the outbreak of 2011, and then this in 2014.
Yes. So let's real quick, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but let's go ahead and talk about why this actually happened. And right up here, I'm going to actually show the sounding.
Yeah, and it's very interesting how it all happened. And I know that we talked about we completely missed this forecast by a long shot. I mean, it wasn't even close. One of the things I mentioned earlier was the precipitation was a little bit further north than what we were actually thinking it was going to be. The other thing is where I circled here and put an arrow by it. Early on, you had a cap in place. Talk about that warm layer loft, and so when the precipitation started to fall, the temperature at the ground was well below freezing. It was, I believe, in the lower 20s. In some places, we're even in the teens as well. But when the precipitation started to fall, it started to fall as more of a mixture. You had some sleet, maybe even some rain in there as well, and a couple of snowflakes. And this was at the sounding at 6 o'clock in the morning. But then you switch over to 6 o'clock in the evening, the 0Z sounding, and you notice how that cap's gone, everything's below freezing. Yes. And that's the perfect sounding you would want for snowfall. And so between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., you had a transition happen in the atmosphere. And it didn't take all that time to do it. It happened actually pretty quickly, but it was just when they do the soundings and stuff. But you had the precipitation fall, the roadways, the ground's temperatures were above freezing. And so you had an instant flash freeze because the air temperature was so cold. I mentioned earlier, it's not like the freezing rain process to where you have rain falling and the air temperature is 32 degrees, but it still might take some time for the roadway temps or even the ground temps to get at or below freezing. So you might have liquid on the ground with an air temperature of 34 degrees, and then finally later on in the evolution of the system, the ground temperature reaches freezing, and then you start seeing all the ice start to form. With this one, it was once it hit contact on the ground and it melted, it was the air temperature that was so cold that it immediately turned into ice. And so you all automatically got that instant sheet of ice. I mean, it happens within a matter of minutes, maybe even seconds. What we call a flash freeze, just like a flash flood. It just happens very quickly.
And this, of course, is the actual radar itself and the surface analysis when that happened. And as you can see, there is a low pressure sitting over basically just off to the east of Chattanooga.
Yeah, you had a front that moved through the day before and ushered in the colder air, and that's the front that you see down there getting across parts of Florida down into the Gulf of Mexico. And then what happened behind it is you had a wave of low pressure, we call a trough of low pressure, that developed, and that creates more lift in the atmosphere. And so then we had more precipitation that fell behind the front where the cold air was already in place. So it was a perfect setup for seeing some snow down here. It wasn't your big Gulf low setup because you didn't have a big area of low pressure down there in the Gulf of Mexico that would give us several inches, talk about 8+ inches of snow. But it was a good setup to see snow across parts of the area. And so we knew that there was going to be some snow, but we thought that the majority of the weather and the impacts are going to be across Montgomery, Prattville, Opelika, Auburn, down there maybe towards even Alexander City, that southeastern type portion of central and southern Alabama. And but yeah, the precipitation ended up being a little bit further north than we expected, and all that happened because of that.
So there, of course, is the sentiments that we talked about. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about what we can expect in the future. Now, let's stop talking about the past and focus on the future.
Yeah, so we have another system we're watching coming up this weekend. Doesn't have a severe weather or winter weather look with it whatsoever. You might think, well, why are you saying that? That low's in a pretty good spot. The temperatures of the atmosphere are only going to be in the 40s and 50s.
Right.
So I have no doubt there's going to be some elevated instability. You're probably going to have some thunderstorms out there when the front moves in, but they're going to be elevated. So it's going to be just one of those. You're going to have some rain, some storms rolling through, and nothing to worry about.
Maybe some small hail.
Yeah, you can, especially with this the way the atmosphere sets up. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see some locations receiving some small hail. You get that with the elevated instability,
like a pea-sized hailstone.
Exactly, maybe pebble size as well. You really don't see. With this right here, you wouldn't see large hail potential. You could if the temperatures were a little bit warmer at the surface, but you still had a lot more instability and colder temperatures elevated. You don't, in this situation, because the temperatures are on the cooler side of things, you don't get all that big lifting motion, that very big moist air that can get lifted into the atmosphere. You're basically going on the lapse rates in the mid levels, meaning that the temperature really starts to decrease rapidly as you go with height, and that in turn increases the instability value. So that's what you're going to be going off of with this. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a few rumbles of thunder, some storms. Yeah, maybe producing a little bit of some small hail maybe across the area. This is Saturday night, but good news is we're not seeing a severe weather or tornado threat with this.
And just for future reference, guys, when we talk about instability, lapse rates, shear, all that stuff, we will cover that a little bit later on, but we won't cover it right now because there's no real graphics to talk about it. We will be talking about it coming up if we do have a significant severe weather event. Then we can kind of get into the nuts and bolts of what velocity is and helicity and all of that.
Yeah, it takes it takes some visualization aids to show all that stuff, but yeah, we'll be able to. I know that we'll toss the words out sometimes, especially sometimes if we're dealing with a big severe weather event or maybe something's questionable. I might do a long, somewhat of a long post on Facebook, trying to get a little bit more into the details to give you guys an idea of what exactly is going through my mind, our minds, what we look at and stuff, and we can explain a lot of it pretty well. But there's some stuff where you can't really do it without some visual help.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so this is a week from tonight.
Yes. Yeah. So this is the GFS for next Thursday night, and we'll also show the European model. And there's some timing discrepancies between the two models, which can be expected for it being a week out. But yet again, this would be dealing with a line of showers and storms moving on through. I don't really see this being a big severe weather threat right now, especially with the area of low pressure being shunted well off to the north, getting up to the Great Lakes. So you start losing a lot of the lifting mechanism and the support, the dynamic support in the low levels. On the other hand, when you look at the European model on that Thursday as well, it shows the same thing with the showers and storms starting to move in. I think that's the Thursday one. So yet again,
Saturday night.
That's Saturday night. Okay, yeah, that's the Saturday. So yeah, with Saturday night, the European model showing kind of the same thing the GFS does, which is some cooler temperatures in place, but probably dealing with a few rumbles of thunder and stuff. But the European shows the same thing on Thursday. You notice it has a very, very thin line of showers and storms coming up with the cold front, and so it wouldn't surprise me to get a few strong storms with this setup. The way that the winds appear to be looking at, on the in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, it looks favorable for at least some form of stronger storms, maybe a low end severe weather risk.
Right.
But this doesn't look like it's going to be what happened the other day again. This doesn't look like it's going to be a big issue. But again, it's 7 days, it's a week out, so we have time to watch this. Things can change between now and then. But as it looks right now, the temperature profile doesn't really support a giant storm threat.
Taylor, look at that real quick. Look, dude, can you imagine the snowstorm in Minnesota with a 974 millibar low?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've been talking about over the past couple of weeks, where we started getting to that pattern to where things would favor more of a Midwestern type of snowstorms that move through. We were first thinking that maybe the latter part of the month of January we would still kind of be in that pattern to where we would maybe see another winter threat. But as we kept getting closer and closer, it looked like, okay, well, it's going to be more of a Midwestern maybe area of concern, and then we would have to start to worry about maybe some storms as well. Right. And this is right along with that pattern. I mean, we get storms down here, we get rain and storms down here, and they get winter storms and even blizzards up on the north side of the storm, up towards the Great Lakes, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, even down to parts of, I know not with this one, but with others, parts of Illinois, Indiana, have gotten in on the mix as well. But yeah, talking about below 980 millibar low, you're talking blizzard conditions up there on the northern side of that thing.
Have you ever seen thunder snow?
I have twice, and it's a very strange, eerie type of phenomena that you encounter. And I know a lot of people have probably heard us throw that term out before. So it develops the same way as it does during thunderstorms. It's just the interaction of ice particles and the instability. They just start getting friction, and you get different charges that form, and then you get enough charge in the atmosphere, and then it ignites, and you get a lightning strike. So it forms the same way. But the weird thing about it is the best way I can describe it without you actually being there and experiencing it is a low rumble. So if you remember, just think back in your memory some of the storms that you might remember come through here. If you remember hearing thunder that just, you hear it from miles and miles away, but it keeps getting louder and louder. It just keeps rumbling and rumbling and rumbling and goes and goes and goes. That's thanks to a temperature inversion. Most of that happens behind the line of storms. So when the line of storms comes through, your temperatures are warm at the surface, and then there's no cap in place, and you go up in the atmosphere and it gets colder. Well, behind the front, you actually get a temperature inversion that forms to where it's cooler at the surface, but still above you, it's now warmer. And so behind the storms, you get some stratiform rain is what we call it. You just get that kind of light to sometimes moderate rain that happens behind a line of storms. And if you still have instability, you get thunder that gets produced and lightning that gets produced. And the thunder can just carry for miles and miles and miles because of that inversion. It's the same type of sound with thunder snow. The only problem is you have to be very, very close to the strike to hear it. What happens, it's different from rain, that what snow is, not only just because of the physical aspect of it, but because of the density. So with liquid, you don't have it's not as dense, and it's not as close together as what I'm trying to get at. The sound can move through that pretty easily. What happens with the snow is not only the cold air is more dense, but the snow is dense, and that's when you walk out during a snowstorm and it's snowing like crazy. and you might walk out into your street and nobody else is out in the street. And you just stand there and you just hear how quiet it is. And you can barely hear like the snow, maybe some ice pellets coming down. It's just super eerie quiet. That's because of the density out there. The sound can't travel that well. And so you literally have to be within a couple of miles of the lightning strike to hear it. And when you hear it, it is this very low, rumbled, muffled sound. Think of it as a truck that's kind of souped up, especially when you get those nice trucks down here in the South. You get those nice mufflers on them, and when you start that truck up, you get that kind of low, muffled sound from the muffler. That's kind of the same thing. It's just not as loud, but it has that same low tone to it, and it's not a crack. You don't really hear a big crack. It's just a big low tone, almost like a tuba sounding, or a one of the big I'm blanking on the drums that you have in the band, the big ones that you have, the big drumsticks that hit on it. Mm-hmm. That's the best way I can describe it. You have to experience it to understand. It is the most eeriest, creepiest, yet amazing, and quite frankly, especially with us in the weather community, because it's so rare. It's exhilarating. That's why you see Jim Cantori over there on the Weather Channel. Whenever he sees it, he goes just completely nuts, because it's super rare to get. But when you get it, it's interesting, and it sounds pretty eerie.
Have you ever seen it down south?
Yeah, that's both times I've seen it. It was when we had a snowstorm back in, when was it? We had one in, it was the 2011 one, I think, when we had the big snow that happened in January. We had about, 8 inches of snow on the ground. And it happened during the event started during the night. It started out as some sleet and then moved into changing over to snow. And during that, we had some thunder snow with it. But the more recent one was in 2014, I believe. It was either 2014 or 2015. It was when we had our last big snow, where we had a foot of snow here in Huntsville, at least in the part of town that I lived at. We had a foot of snow, and that one had some thunder snow with it. I think it was either it's 2014 or 2015. It was. I know it was before I had my first TV job over in Wyoming. I know it was before that, so it was sometime between 2011 and 2015. I'd have to look that up, but that was the last time that I heard thunder snow.
I'm gonna pull you up full screen, and I'm gonna let you talk for a minute.
All right. So, but yeah, I can't remember. I have to look it up. I can't remember exactly when that happened. I see got our friend Scott Blakely joining us tonight, and talk about my schooling and stuff. He always teasing me about it. I'm a Bama fan at heart, but yet I went to Mississippi State, but that was just because Alabama didn't have the meteorology stuff. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that snow event was it might have been the same year that we had the Snowmageddon. It might be.
Okay.
I can't completely remember. I know it was around that time though.
I got you. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the month.
Yeah, things look to be getting more active as we end out the month, talking about this weekend and getting into even the early part of February. Temperature-wise, at least for the majority of the state, according to the Climate Prediction Center, we should be just around average for this time of year. So temperatures in the 40s, 50s, lows getting down into around freezing can be expected. looking at above average temperatures as you head towards the eastern part of the United States, but big time below average over there in the western part of the state. I was actually talking to you, Stephen, before we went on air here. Lake Tahoe, I don't know if y'all have been paying attention to the big snows that have been happening across the Sierras out there in California, but they have gotten over 100 inches of snow within a matter of days. Just amazing snowfall totals with those storms out there. So they will continue to be below average out there through the beginning to the latter part, getting toward the middle part of the month of February. Precipitation wise, we're going to be above average when it comes to rainfall, and if we happen to get any winter weather down here, that's contributing to the precipitation above average as well. So that just goes to show that we'll probably be dealing more with stormy weather than winter weather for the time being. That is because just based on the fact that we should have normal to slightly above average temperatures in place. But what we're watching for, I don't have any graphics for this, but I'll talk about it just briefly. This is still several days out. We're talking about a couple weeks out, getting into the month of February. We look like we could be getting into another pattern that would favor some winter mischief down here. Don't exactly know how it would all pan out, of course, because we're not close enough to it yet. But the pattern would favor it. There's some good trends that I'm seeing in some of the models. The GFS ensembles are getting a little interesting, to say the least, when it comes to winter aspect down here. So just something to keep in mind. I was still sold on the idea that what we had a few weeks ago with the snow event down here in the south, I was still sold on the idea that wouldn't be our last chance to see some snow down here. I was thinking that maybe there would be something towards the end of January, but the coldest air started trending a little bit more away from us and a little bit further to the north to where we would be dealing with more stormy activity. But it looks like we're going to be getting back into a favorable pattern again. If you want some snow down here, fingers crossed, keep your hopes up. Pray. I always tell people, keep your fingers crossed, pray about it, do it. If you have a snow chant, you pray to a snow god, do whatever you need to do if you want to have some winter weather down here. But there's still hope. There's still hope out there, and I still think that this won't be what we had a few weeks ago, won't be our last winter weather threat down here. Whether that happens here across Alabama or it happens across Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi again, like it did the last time, I still think somebody down here is going to have at least another chance at it. I don't know if it will actually pan out, but at least there's going to be a chance, I believe.
Well, man, that's going to do it for this edition of the Forecast with Stingray and TP. We hope you guys have enjoyed it. And have you got anything else you want to add? Just keep the people down in Fultondale in your thoughts and in your prayers. One of the best things I actually saw today on Facebook was some family had lost. I guess thought they had lost their dog in the tornado, and they were digging through the rubble. And lo and behold, their dog had survived. It was underneath some rubble. I don't know if it was actually hurt in any way, but one of my friends who works down there, the weather service down in Birmingham, actually I believe was there on the scene when they found the dog. He had posted a picture about it, and he was holding it. So there's some good things that I've seen that have come out of this that horrible situation down there. It's always nice to be able to find pets, because they become part of your family. I mean, even though they're not human, they are part of your family, and you love them to death, and they they have love to give back as well. And so
just being able to see that is really touching and really is a really good thing to see down there. So the cleanup will continue. I know there's going to be some rain to deal with this weekend, so hopefully everybody has a tarp in place if they need it. But yeah, just it's going to take a while to clean up from that. So just wanted to pass that along. I saw that today, and it was a nice bright spot on something that is just a horrible situation that happened.
And I want to finish with this. Tonight, the low is 29. But if you enjoyed today, you are really going to like tomorrow and Saturday, because we're going to see a ton of sun for the next 2 days.
Yeah, you're going to see sun tomorrow. Going to see sun for the majority of Saturday, and then we have that system moving in during the nighttime. So if you have any plans for your Saturday night, you're going to need that rain gear on hand as well. But yeah, the day on Saturday looks to be pretty decent.
And let me also throw this out there at you. Saturday night, the winds could gust as high as 35 miles per hour.
Yeah, so even though we might not be, we wouldn't be dealing with a severe weather issue, you're still going to get those what we call pressure gradient winds. It's just because the pressure gets tight as you get closer to the area of low pressure. So yeah, you're probably going to see sustained winds on Saturday night, up to around 10, 15, maybe sometimes 20 miles per hour. And yeah, you're going to have some wind gusts, 25, 30, maybe even higher than that. Some of the ridge tops, I wouldn't be surprised to see some wind gusts closing in on 40 miles per hour.
So make sure you secure those outdoor objects, as they say.
Exactly.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Forecast with Stingray and TP. We hope you guys have enjoyed it. We hope that you guys have a safe and blessed weekend and next week. And we will see you right back here on the Forecast with Stingray and TP next Wednesday. We were not able to bring it to you last night. That's why we are a day late. But we are going back to regularly scheduled next week. So we will be right back here next Wednesday. Hope you guys have a great weekend. And as always, God bless.
See you guys.